In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make this Stone Age diorama complete with a thatched roof hut, a papier-mâché cliff behind it, some model trees made of a variety of materials, some grasses, a stick campfire with fake fire inside, some rocks and bulrushes next to a lovely river. For the hut, you'll need to draw around a circular object. I happen to be using a diameter circle of 7.5 centimeters, and I cut out 2 of them because it's a bit easier to have 2 on your base than 1. I then cut off the end of the lolly sticks because these lolly sticks will be glued around the base to create the walls of the hut. I also cut them down to size so that they're approximately 7.5 centimeters long. Glue your 2 circles together. You could use PVA glue or a glue gun, and glue the cut lolly sticks along the circumference of the circle, leaving a gap in between each one. Stone Age people would have used branches for this, and this would have created the main wall structure to support their huts. Make sure you leave a wider gap at one section of the hut for the door. You're then going to cut thin strips of any colour card. These strips were just under 1 centimetre wide. And once you've cut these, you're then going to use them to create the wattle, imitating what Stone Age people would have done when they built their huts. Wattle was made of thin branches that weaved in and out of the stabilizing branches. Here, they are weaving in and out of the lolly sticks. Once you've reached the end, you can glue it onto the last lolly stick. If your paper is too long, trim it. If your paper doesn't quite reach the end, add a little section onto the end of it so that you can attach it to the final lolly stick. You can see here I'm gluing the last little bit of wattle onto the final lolly stick, which is the other side of the door. Continue weaving each strip of the paper wattle in between the lolly sticks, alternating how you weave it so that it creates a kind of interwoven mesh that closes all the gaps. I'm next going to show you 2 ways to make the daub that covers the wattle on the Stone Age hut. This particular piece is made of paper clay, the recipe of which you can find below in the description. Gently paste the paper clay across the wattle that you've just woven, spreading it with your fingers and using any PVA glue to smooth it out. This papier-mâché clay is quite easy to make. You blend up some soaked scrap paper and mix it up in the nutri bullet or blender and strain it out and mix it with some PVA glue. It dries pretty quickly within a day or 2. If it's a hot place, maybe even a few hours, and it dries very firm and strong. The second daub mixture that you can do is adding sodium bicarbonate to PVA glue. When I did it, I added a bit too much glue and a little bit too little sodium bicarbonate, so my mixture was very runny. When you do it, just add a bit more sodium bicarb than I do. I also added some brown paint. You could use acrylic or poster, and mix it up really well. You can see that in a minute, quite bizarrely, this looks just like melted chocolate. But of course, it's absolutely inedible. The nice thing about adding sodium bicarbonate to the PVA is that it adds a gritty kind of muddy texture. Paint alone is a possibility if you don't have sodium bicarbonate or you don't wish to use it. And of course you can just paint your house and pretend the paint is like the Stone Age daub. And for those of you that didn't realise, Stone Age daub that was applied to Stone Age huts was made of animal dung, mud and straw or hay, all mixed together into a gloopy mess that was spread all over the side of the wattle. And that was left to dry in the sun to create a very firm, hard surface that was the walls of Stone Age huts. The easiest thing I found was to spread the daub all over the outside and inside of the hut using some sort of plastic knife or spoon. My daub was quite dribbly because as I said before, I didn't add very much sodium bicarbonate and I added too much PVA glue. If your daub is runny like mine, then make sure that you rest your hut on another bit of cardboard to avoid spillages and avoid it sticking to your table. Before making the rest of my diorama, I think it's best to plan where you're going to put different parts of it. So here with a pencil, I'm plotting the areas of my diorama out and labeling them for myself so I'm clear of my plan. This could be done also on a separate piece of paper if you think you may forget your plan. So you can see at the back I have the rocks and cliffs, and that will be the backdrop for my hut. On the right side I'm hoping to have a river or part of a river running through it so that my Stone Age people can fish and get water. Around the river I'll probably have rocks, and bulrushes and trees and plants. And I'm just planning where the trees will probably go, although I'm not yet quite sure how they will look. But I do know Stone Age people need wood to build, to make weapons, so that's important to have the trees there. You can paint the ground surface of your diorama using just normal paint, or you can add a little bit of bicarbonate of soda to the paint to add grit. If you haven't got bicarbonate of soda, you could also add sand or even fine soil. That will add a bit of little lumps to the paint and grit that will make it a bit more realistic. I'm leaving gaps where my river and my hut should be, and my cliffs, mainly to remind me of where I planned to put them. To make your cliffs, you need to scrunch up pieces of paper. Here I'm using scrap paper and I pile them on top of each other in the vague sort of shape that I'd like my cliffs to be. I add any little lumps and bumps and I bend them to create higher areas on the cliffs. For the paper mache mixture, I'm adding PVA glue to a little water in a container, and I'm going to mix it up with a lolly stick until it resembles semi-skimmed milk. After that, you're going to take strips of thin paper, either newspaper or very thin sort of scrappy paper, and dip it in the glue, run your fingers down it to remove the excess glue, and place it gently over your scrunched up bits of paper so that it resembles a sort of cliff shape. You can press it in the crevices because this adds more interest to your cliffs and makes it look like there are little hidden caves in there. Keep adding a couple of layers of this scrap paper to your cliffs and make sure that you gently spread it over the side of the box as well. This will help it stay more steady and secure in your diorama. For the river, rip a piece of aluminium or tin foil to the appropriate size of your river and turn up the edges, as this will keep in the glue that we pour in later. It's always a good idea to measure your river with the plan that you drew in your box, and it also helps you cut the size of the river accurately. You can mold the aluminium to the correct position and then cut it out so that it's the correct size. Once you've done that, make sure it's fitted in and ensure that the sides are turned up. To add greenery along your riverbank, paint a layer of PVA glue along the edge of the tin foil. You can then sprinkle on what's called flocking. And flocking is made of sawdust that has been dyed with green paint. You can mix this in a cup or small container. You add some sawdust and some green paint and mix it up and about, and that will make your flocking or your sort of greenery. To add rocks and boulders along the edge of your river, you can use cut up sponge. Of course, you can collect real small pebbles and stones and glue them in, but if you can't access those, cutting up a sponge and dyeing it with some paint and gluing it along the edge actually looks quite similar to rocks. I'm using acrylic paint here, but you could also use poster paint if you didn't have acrylic. Mixing the glue and the paint together creates quite a firm brown coloured bond that will ensure the rocks stay permanently attached along your riverbank. If you want to make things look a little bit more organic and more natural, you can add a little bit of yellow ochre colour if you have any, or a sort of yellowy brown to the grass, to the rocks, and even to the floor of your Stone Age hut. And this adds a bit more of a natural sort of dry grassy look. To make your river water, add whatever colour paint you would like to a bit of PVA glue. Mix it thoroughly together and carefully pour it into your aluminium river base. Ensure that you don't spill it over the foliage that you've created on the side, and use a lolly stick to gently nudge it over the edges of the aluminium foil to cover it up. You can see here that I've made one bush already out of a few different materials, and it's firmly attached in the diorama. I'm going to make another bush in this corner, and I'll show you a few different techniques on how to do this. One good way is to find some little branches from the garden or in a local park and bring those back. You can rip the green stuff off of a sponge, and that will give you a sort of leaf-like foliage type material. You can rip it apart into little shreds and glue it onto the branches that you've brought back. Another nice foliage material is pillow stuffing. Here I have some, to which I'm going to add some sawdust with yellow and green paint in for the leaves. As I'm mixing the sawdust with that yellow and green paint, I'm also thinking about how I can attach the stuffing to the branch, perhaps using PVA glue or even a hot glue gun. Add glue to the tops of the branches and separate out blobs of the pillow stuffing and place it on the gluey branch. If you use a glue gun, this will dry immediately and you'll be ready to go. If you use PVA glue, it may take a few hours or a day or so to dry. Once your pillow stuffing or cotton wool is attached firmly to the branch, then use a lolly stick to apply blobs of glue to different areas of it. To this glue, you will then attach the sawdust and paint mixture so that it resembles leaves. This will be built up layer by layer until you're happy that your tree resembles the bush or tree that you want it to. You can also add some paint using a rough brush. This will also help give the appearance of leaves. As you paint it, you can also repeatedly dip it back into the sawdust mixture and keep building up these layers until you're happy with your bush or tree. For the roof of the hut, You need a circle that is a little bit wider than the hut all the way round. I happen to be using about a 10.5 centimetre diameter circle, and I draw around it in order to get my circular shape, which I cut out and slit it up the middle so that I can form and glue together a conical shape or cone. This will be placed, glued on the roof of the house, and I can then make my thatched imitation roof using straw. If your roof is a bright colour, make sure you paint it a dull brown or black first before adding the straw. I use a glue gun to add glue to the roof, but you can just as well use PVA glue. And I press the straw gently onto the roof, not worrying about anything at this point, because in a little while I can give the roof a little haircut using scissors. I keep applying the glue and applying the straw, making sure that it's thick all the way round, and then I cut around the edges and give the whole roof a little cut. Once your hut is complete, glue gun is probably the best and most secure glue to attach it firmly to the base of your diorama. If you'd like to represent grasses that reflect Mesolithic and Neolithic people's farming, wrap string around your fingers about 3 or 4 times and cut it so it's a similar length. Once you've done this, pull out each separate strands from the string. Here you can see I'm pulling out 3 separate strands from that section of string. Once you've pulled each of the sections out, comb them so that they lose their curl and become grass-like in the way they look. Trim them off, and now you have your Mesolithic or Neolithic grass that you can glue into your diorama. I like to imagine that my Neolithic people could walk out of their Stone Age hut, pick the seeds of the grasses, grind it up and create prehistoric bread. If your grasses are tricky to stick down, use a long stick to help with the process. I hope you liked this tutorial. Please do like and subscribe, and follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Henkel Art.